Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today's wine is taking us to Maule in Chile's Central Valley, and we're looking at the Garage Wine Co. 2018 Las Higueras Vineyard Cabernet Franc. When Garage Wine Co. was launched in 2003 by husband and wife team Derek Mossman Knapp and Pilar Miranda, they set out to work with and vinify small parcels from micro terroirs across central Chile. And they sought to tell a slightly different story about Chilean wine. Their beginnings were, quite literally, making wine in their garage, usually from 1 to 2 hectare parcels of old vines, in some cases from abandoned vineyards, in select areas in Maipo, Maule, and Itata. They're working with several different grape varieties, including old vine País and Carignan, and of course, Chile's most important French variety, Cabernet Sauvignon. But over the course of the last decade or so, Cabernet Franc has become a bit of a calling card for the winery. And the Las Higueras bottling is one of 2 single vineyard, single varietal Cabernet Francs that Garage makes. Cabernet Franc remains a very small piece of the overall viticultural landscape in Chile. There's around 1,685 hectares of Cabernet Franc vines planted in the country. And this is a drop in the bucket compared to the over 40,000 hectares of Cabernet Sauvignon planted in Chile. But in 1997, there was only around 64 hectares of Cabernet Franc vines planted in the country. So this represents quite a large increase in Cabernet Franc plantings over the course of the last 30 years. And that makes a Cabernet Franc nerd like me quite happy. Today's wine is coming from Maule, which is one of 5 regions that make up Chile's Central Valley, which is the heartland of Chilean wine production, representing around 76% of the total area under vine in the country. Of this, about 1/3 of the area under vine in the Central Valley is in Maule, and Maule accounts for around 1/4 of the Central Valley's production, and that makes Maule the largest region in Chile's Central Valley. Maule has an interesting story. Author Amanda Barnes refers to Maule as the grassroots region in the Central Valley, with humble, old-school farming at the core of this region's identity. These origins, as well as the favorable Mediterranean climate with slightly more continental influences, as well as the fact that Maule experiences double the amount of precipitation compared to Maipo or Cachapoal, this led to an influx in plantings over the course of the late 18th and into the 19th centuries, with European varieties making their way to the region in the late 19th century, just as phylloxera was taking hold in Europe. Many of these vineyards that were planted with French varieties were planted as mixed field blends, typically dry farmed because of the higher amount of precipitation that the region experiences. These humble origins, as well as the lack of foreign investment as compared to other regions closer to the capital city of Santiago, Maule became synonymous with bulk wine production, and this continued for the better part of the 20th century and really still remains a large part of what this region is all about today. However, over the course of the last decade or so, there has been a bit of a quiet renaissance in parts of Maule. At the core of this renewed interest in the region are these very old vineyards. Producers like Garage Wine Co. and others began working with these once abandoned vineyards, and they saw the value that these old, dry farmed vines brought to the table. They began working with local farmers, paying fair wages and paying a premium for the fruit. And they began making small production, high quality wine that told a very special story about Maule. So with all that said, let's take a closer look at the growing environment here in Maule. As is the case across Chile as a whole, the climate of a given region is dictated more by its proximity to either the Pacific Ocean or the Andes Mountains as opposed to latitude. And this is why we tend to see terms like costa, which means coast, or entre cordilleras or Andes on labels as an indication as to where that fruit is coming from within a given region, and it helps us understand a bit more the climate of that particular area rather than seeing a named subregion on a specific label. And this is most certainly the case in Maule. Maule is a huge region. It's over 100 kilometers wide. It's nearly 150 kilometers from north to south. And while the region can be divided into three distinct subregions, we have the Claro Valley, we have the Loncomilla Valley, and we have the Tutuben Valley. The climate of these subregions is better articulated by their position relative to the Pacific Ocean or to the Andes. So the Tutuben Valley is located in the Maule Costa, which means that it experiences the strongest cooling influence from the Pacific. The Claro Valley stretches across all three of these zones, and then the Loncomilla Valley has vineyards in the Entre Cordilleras and the Andes zones. This wine is coming from the Loncomilla Valley, whose borders can be loosely defined by the Purapel River to the west. We have the Andes Mountains in the east, and the Maule River defines the northern border where Loncomilla meets the Claro Valley. Now, the vineyards that are in the Entre Cordilleras area in the Loncomilla Valley tend to be a little bit warmer compared to the vineyards that are in the Andes zone. So drilling down even further than that, the Las Higueras Vineyard is located in the Andes zone. So we're in a slightly cooler area, which is good for Cabernet Franc. And this vineyard is located just north of the Achibueno River and just to the west of the town of Linares. The vineyard is at an elevation of around 165 meters above sea level in the lower foothills of the Andes. So the vineyard does get a bit of a benefit from altitude here, as well as it benefits from the cool air that descends down from the Andes at night. This site has about 9 hectares of Cabernet Franc vines, and this site is farmed in its entirety by the Garage Wine Co. team. But only about 2 hectares goes into this specific bottling, and they're selling off the rest of that fruit to other producers. In terms of soils here, we are dealing with alluvial soils, and it's a mix of clay and large river stones, and then we have a subsoil that's a touch more sandy with larger stones again. Now this portion of 2 hectares that goes into this particular bottling, this is coming from a very specific block of own-rooted pre-phylloxera Cabernet Franc vines that are nearly 120 years old. This vineyard was more or less abandoned by the previous owner, and this block of Cabernet Franc used to be trellised, but over time the posts and wires fell into disrepair, and rather than fixing them, the team decided that they wanted to return the vines back to nature, so to speak. So these Cabernet Franc vines are bush vine trained, and they are dry farmed using organic practices. And as another interesting side note, Derek told me that there was clearly something very interesting or very special about this Cabernet Franc block, because this 9 hectares of Cabernet Franc vines were once part of a larger vineyard of about 100 hectares that was pulled up about 25 years ago, except this block of Cabernet Franc. So the Garage Wine Co. team has been working with this block since 2013, and uniquely, this particular block of Cabernet Franc also achieves phenolic maturity consistently at a slightly lower degree of alcohol, around 13% or so. Now, from a winemaking perspective, the fruit for this wine is hand harvested. It is mostly destemmed and it is crushed. And the fruit, once it is in the fermenter, they'll go in and do some light punch downs just to extract a bit of juice. Then they will add back in the most lignified stems of all the bunches. This is about 20% or so. The fermentation is with indigenous yeast in oval stainless steel vats, and they're more shallow, more flat, more horizontal, I guess. So Derek said that this means that the wine doesn't require quite as much as far as cap management techniques are concerned. The post-fermentation maceration is around 10 days or so, and then aging is for about 18 months in third use or older French oak barrels. So let's dive into this wine. So on the nose, you immediately sense that this is coming from somewhere slightly warmer. There is a sunniness and a ripeness to the nose, but it is by no means overripe at all. It's a beautiful ripeness, and you get these sweet fruits, a mix of darker and some red fruits. I'm getting a mix of like red cherry. There's a bit of black cherry here, a bit of black raspberry as well. And there is a bit of a brambly nature or woodsy kind of character to the fruit. And I would say that this wine leans a little bit more savory, which I do really like. And I like the pyrazine profile that's coming through. It's wonderful. It's a mix of fresh as well as some dried herbs, more like oregano, marjoram, maybe even a bit of bay leaf. And there is that kind of garrigue thing that we tend to say about, warmer climate wines. There is this edge of Mediterranean shrubbery or something like that. The nose is also quite spicy, and I like that. And it's coming through with some baking spices here, maybe even a bit of chili flake. There's even a little bit of a floral thing going on in the nose too. So there's a lot going on here in this wine. On the palate, the same red and dark fruits come through really nicely. They lean a smidge more tart on the palate, which I really like because that does provide a nice counter point to the slightly riper, sweeter fruit profile on the nose. That savoriness comes through as it did. There's some additional layers here. I'm getting a touch of licorice. There's a little bit of like a milk chocolate thing. That spice is coming through a little bit more pronounced, like a cinnamon stick, clove as well. The acidity in this wine is fantastic. It's mouth-watering, very invigorating, cleansing, and it does actually provide that nice counterpoint again. So we have this slightly riper, sweeter fruit profile on the nose, but that's balanced really beautifully by this freshness and this invigorating acidity. The tannins they're ripe, and there is a distinct chew, I guess, to the tannins is how I would describe it. The texture of the tannins is kind of reminiscent of like a merino wool sweater, if that makes any sense to anybody. So this wine sits a bit more broadly. There is a certain density and weight to the wine, a certain fleshiness, a certain plushness to the wine that suggests that it is coming from somewhere warm. But again, that acidity is really, really balanced. We have these great tannins, these chewy, kind of sinewy tannins that are providing some nice structure. And that is really balancing the ripeness of the fruit and the overall profile of this wine really well. I would say it's probably a medium bodied, well, medium plus or so bodied wine, which is, it's in keeping with Cabernet Franc's nature, so to speak. And I also do like the fact that there's no wood influence here. Sometimes in warmer microclimates, there's often a little bit more of a, well, also in the New World as well, there tends to be a bit more of a new oak punch to many of the Cabernet Francs I've had. And this is really all about the grape, which I really love. Yeah, this wine has this wonderful refined rusticity to it. There's a quiet confidence about it as well. And there is a certain, I don't know, like unwavering character. Like there is a certain, resolute nature about this wine. And that's really the structure coming through. But for me, this wine really does speak to the grape. It speaks to the place, like that it's coming from somewhere a little bit warmer, but it is Cabernet Franc. It's true to the variety, and that's one of the reasons why I was extremely impressed with the wines from the Cabernet Francs from Garage when I had them for the first time. I've already done a video featuring the Pirque Vineyard Cabernet Franc, and when I had this for the first time about 6 or so months ago, I was really impressed. Like, these are really excellent examples of Cabernet Franc from Chile, and there isn't a ton of single-varietal Cabernet Franc coming from Chile right now, but I'm hopeful that maybe we might start to see a bit more in the future. But if you're a fan of Cabernet Franc, this is definitely a wine to put on your radar for sure, and the Pirque Vineyard for that matter, because Garage is doing some really great things with the variety, and they're really probably one of the forerunners as far as, the flag bearer that I always talk about, somebody in Chile that really is getting behind this variety. So if you've had these wines before, or you have another favorite wine from Garage Wine Co., do let me know what that is in the comments below. And of course, as always, I will be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.